And thank you for the invitation today, and thank you for all the previous talks, really setting the scene. I'm indeed actually in two faculties, so Faculty of Medicine and Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, and I use this One Health approach in my research and actually lead Helsinki One Health network. And we have a new project starting this year. It's an Academy of Finland project called Resilient and Just Systems, where we combine 8 faculties to work on all kinds of global challenges that are challenging our health. And if we think of infectious diseases, so we are not going viral, but we actually talk of viral diseases here. There's many aspects, but I will talk about zoonosis. So infectious diseases that come from animals and jump to people. And actually 75% of all the new emerging infectious diseases are zoonoses. So they are highly important. And in this picture, this is actually from one of the EU projects in which I work, and we try to predict what is the next pandemic or next outbreak. And we also want to understand the drivers of disease emergence, and you can see here one summary of all those things related to us people, our behavior, our numbers, what comes to animals as a source of these pathogens or as we produce them for food, and then all the aspects of environment and climate, of course, being one of them. And all of this is highly intertwined, as we have already heard today. So One Health is a concept. I would say it's a lifestyle in a way. And it was redefined last year by these organizations. They have a joint plan of action for One Health. And it seeks to improve the health of humans, animals, plants, and the environment all together, and recognizes that these are intertwined. So we can't have human health if we don't have environmental health. So this is where I come from, and I will use 2 examples. So I won't talk about COVID-19 anymore. It's a really intriguing outbreak or pandemic. We actually have probably more of SARS coronavirus 2 circulating at the moment than in a long time. So if you look at the wastewater surveillance, it's really high in numbers, and we have a new variant. I can't even remember the name anymore. There's been so many, so it will stay with us. And we were kind of hoping to have a breather and not have the next threat, but there it is. So I will talk about avian flu, but before I talk about avian flu, I want to talk about something very prevalent or very important for us here in Finland. So if we think of infectious diseases that are climate sensitive, it is the vector-borne diseases, because mosquitoes and ticks that are transmitting these pathogens, they are really sensitive to effects of the climate. So on the left you see Ixodes tick. This is very prevalent here in Finland. When I grew up in central Finland, there were no ticks. I had never seen a tick until I came to University of Helsinki and we started to study these. But nowadays these are very prevalent there as well, and so are the diseases that they spread. And on the right you see a tiger mosquito, Aedes albopictus, which is one of the most important disease vectors across the world, and this is really being followed carefully through, for example, social media notifications and all kinds of apps where you can add a picture of the mosquito, and there is a concern that through climate change this species might also reach Finland at some point. It will not happen soon, but it is moving ahead, and we have new diseases, for example in Germany, mosquito-borne diseases, very important ones, so they are not that far actually. And talking about One Health, there is a disease called African swine fever, not a threat to us as people, except that it does kill the swine. It has now been found in Sweden, and it is found in Estonia, it is found in Russia, but not yet in Finland. And it is also partly vector transmitted disease, but we don't have it yet. So this picture, I think I need to explain a little bit. So what we do is we actually try to understand the drivers. Why do we have ticks growing in number in certain areas, and why do we have disease? Tick-borne encephalitis is our main target study. Of course, borreliosis or Lyme disease is the other one. So there is plenty of ticks here in Helsinki, and especially on the islands. And this is one of the islands, and we actually study the microclimate, so really local climate factors that will have an impact on the number of the ticks. And we actually have some really nice data coming up that especially in the springtime, the local microclimate is very important for the tick abundance. And you can see this white flag there on the ground. So this is how we normally collect the ticks. So you take a flag, you drag it on the ground, and ticks will attach to it. Then you turn it and take a tweezer, and then you really have to pick them one by one. But this site has so many ticks that we couldn't get anywhere. So we were just standing there, and they were just crawling all over us. And here we are picking them from each other and from our clothing. So a really nice study site, but I really understand the people who live here that this is not a really nice summer cottage place. But you really didn't have to do anything except stand there. So ticks are moving as the temperature rises. They are also very dependent on the humidity. So these are the two factors. And we can see this very directly on the cases of tick-borne encephalitis. So here's two sets of 5-year study sites, and the next one is coming soon. So on the left, it's 2007 to 2011. You can see the number of TB cases in Finland. Then 5 years later, I'm sure you can appreciate that there are new foci and higher number of cases, and it's just continuing exactly the same path. We have a vaccine available, but it is really only recommended at the sites where we first identified the disease. We would like to predict where the disease is found, but we are not yet able to do that. So we kind of have to, unfortunately, wait for the first case, and only then the authorities offer the vaccine for free. So this is clear. Ticks and mosquitoes, they are very much impacted by the climate, but so are actually all the other reservoirs. And where do zoonosis come from? It is bats and it is rodents. We actually have a study on urban rats with Tuomas Aivelo. I will not talk about that here today, but it is mostly rodents and bats. And this is from 2018, so before COVID-19, and there was a watch list for us virologists. So what is the next public health emergency or next pandemic? And you see these really complicated names of viruses, but they are all viruses, they are all zoonoses, and they cause very, very severe disease. And you can see the coronaviruses. So there was an idea that there could be a coronavirus pandemic. And then there's disease X on the list. And this is a comment that this is a mystery killer keeping us awake at night. Well, I was sleeping, but I did keep thinking about this, and I was, and like many of us, we were really thinking that it could be a coronavirus. And if you ask me today, what's the next pandemic after avian flu, I would say it's SARS-CoV-3 that will come, because the world is full of coronaviruses. But at this point, it was open and COVID came. And all of these actually, none of them are present here in Finland, in our reservoir, in our bats. We don't see we have some coronaviruses, but they are not interesting. So all of these come either from Asia, or they come from Africa, and some of them are present in South America. So really populated areas heavily impacted by climate change. And what we have done is we work in Kenya. So University of Helsinki has a field station in Kenya, and that's where we work, and there's a high biodiversity also on the pathogens, and we've been kind of hunting for the next pandemic pathogen in Kenya. We find a lot of interesting things. We found a new Ebola virus, but it's not going to be the next pandemic. And I have been asked a lot that will the next pandemic start in Finland, and I have given the answer that no way, it's not. We don't have the reservoirs, and we have a really nice biosecurity here. I really hope I don't have to change my opinion on this topic, but at the moment there is a concern, which is avian flu. Avian flu is nothing new. It has been circulating for almost 30 years, so it's been known since 1996. And when I was doing my PhD thesis, I started in 1999. I remember there was a lot of talk on avian flu and a lot of studies, a lot of interest, and it was really the big threat, which never really took off. However, influenza viruses, of course, they have caused the main pandemics throughout the years, and they do this by mixing up different influenza A viruses from pigs, from birds, and from us people, and they can switch whole, if you say chromosomes or genes, and they can really change how these viruses are infectious and how they actually spread. So there is a question mark. Will there be something? And the current question is, of course, is it H5N1 that we have particularly a lot here in Finland at the moment? So on my slide it says 26 farms, and if you checked today's paper, it's actually 27. So we have yet another farm very recently detected and having an ongoing infection. So this virus has been known for 30 years. It's circulating all over the world. We've had it in wildlife in Finland for years. So what is different now this year? Why did it come to the mammals, which is of course a concern? So from the birds, it doesn't infect people well, but what happens if it is allowed to circulate in the mammals and turn into something that is pathogenic to people? So what has happened? And the answer, one of them is of course climate change. So I was actually in a meeting just early this week, and there was one of the main influenza experts of the world, and he said that we have absolutely completely failed to prevent an influenza pandemic. And there are 3 reasons that we haven't addressed, and first of them is climate change. The second is the poultry production. So if we take the bird biomass of the whole world, 70% today is actually poultry, chicken that we use, and this is the second thing that he was very precise. This is what we did wrong, and we have to put the limit to poultry production across the world. And then, of course, the third being really that there hasn't really been proper surveillance or vaccine development, and we didn't do the actions that we were supposed to do. We knew how it will come and what will happen, but we were not acting on those recommendations. And this was actually his third message, that we need to talk to, as experts, we need to be very clear that this is what I recommend, and then we follow up, that the policy makers, everyone knows what the recommendations are, and really need to keep going and pressing and talking about this and not let go. So this is us. You can't really see the picture, so we went on the farms to see what's going on. It's really a devastating animal disease at the moment. Luckily, no human cases so far. So this is all the virology that I have here. So this is like a family tree of the viruses. So each dot is or end of the line is a different virus that we have found in Finland. Some of this is by the authorities, some of this is by us. And the longer you move to the right, the more time has passed. And these are all this year, all in Finland. So there was one introduction to Finland, and if you go up there, it starts from the birds, so migratory birds. So it's first only in the gulls, then you have a mixture, so you see the birds, and then the minks, so it really entered from the minks to the birds to the minks, and then as you move along, you only see it in the farmed animals, so now it is circulating on the farms. And a little bit of fancy calculations, and it says that the virus arrived in late March to Finland this year. And what happened in late March? Well, it's the migratory birds that arrived here. And well, they have come here every year before, so why now? Why did they bring the virus now? And this is my final slide where I end, and there's actually a really nice opinion paper just yesterday in Science discussing this and the migratory bird flyways and how they have been changing through the climate change. And now they bring the viruses to new areas because they are on a different route. And some bird species are more sensitive to changes in climate, so they change first. Some stay, so we have new connections, so we have actually new bird species coming into contact with one another, changing viruses, leading to all these bird mass die-outs that we have seen last year and this year. And it's really driving the current avian flu outbreak. And even though we would do something on our fur animal farms now, the virus is all over the world, and it will come back with the migratory birds next spring again. So actually our fur farms are really just casualty on the side, and this has been building up for 30 years, this avian flu outbreak, and I really hope we will do what is necessary to stop this. And this, one of the things is to look at the poultry production too. And that's all my slides, so thank you for your attention.
So thank you so much for this outlook also into the future. Is there any questions? Kari, please. Ole hyvä.
Thank you for a very, very good presentation. Now we all have experienced the seasonal flu that comes every autumn, and once the particular kind of virus is clear, then the vaccinations start, and apparently it has some effect, but it's not very efficient, and it changes all the time. What do you foresee as where is the vaccine development taking us? Is it possible to develop a vaccine that would take some other approach to the influenza virus that would be sort of more generally applicable to any of those different kinds, and perhaps also more effective?
That is a really good question. So the seasonal flu vaccine is really not always that good. Yes, there is. I think the COVID era really has been speeding up vaccine development, and I hope it translates into influenza vaccines. So there is a look at the avian influenza genome, and there are parts that are very conserved throughout the different influenza types. So this would be like a pan-influenza vaccine. So it is in production. When is it available to us? I don't know. Will take some time, but there's definitely progress there.
Some other question. I'd like to ask, if I may, about this. I mean, you mentioned all those top lists, top 10. Yeah. I mean, many of them, of course, are in Africa.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, do you see that during we heard today about the African agriculture changes and so on, pitfalls and so. Is there any possibility that something Sonos will come from there?
Absolutely, and that's really the reason why we are working there. And if we talk about the poultry production, it's really increasing very fast in Africa at the moment. So that's just one of the concerns, that the birds are migrating from Europe to Africa, and there has been some really severe avian flu outbreaks in Africa before. So there is a definite concern.
But before we Pertti, I think we should agree that we should not put all the blame on the birds. There could be some other factors here also that are involved.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
don't you
It's
think
us
so
humans. It's us humans. So I will blame us.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Okay, thank you once more.